Rikshay Kodesh and the Slavos excitement, and a Hodah to the Borei Olam that he brought us to be able to explain the Svarma Kedoshim and gives us incredible Yidden to speak to. It's such a schus to be able to share Torah, to share Musar, to share Sefer like Mesilas Yesharim with people, and I'm full of Akar Tov for the opportunity. So let's begin. Hakdamas Harav Mechaber. You have to see Hakdamas sometimes. You have to see an introduction. People will jump over introductions. No, not a good idea. Let's see the introduction. Now, you'll see that we should see the introduction because, in fact, Rabbeinu Ramchal, who we said so much about already, starts with a bomb. And one of the biggest chidushim in the whole Sefer is coming up in the first few lines. Amar Mechaber. Hachibur hazeh lo chibartiv l'lamed l'bnei adam. I didn't write this to teach people et asher lo yadu, things they don't know. Ella laskirim, to remind them. Es yadu lehem kfar u'merfusam etzlam pirsum gadol. Things that they know and things that are mefusam, that are widely acclaimed. Pirsumim. Marketing is called farsem. Pirsum gadol. Wow. I didn't write this to say chidushim. Sometimes people write a sefer. It's moli chidushim. I only included my chidushim, included my novel points. I wanted to share my novel points to the tzibur. Says Rabbeinu, no. I'm coming to talk about what's known and to remind them. Now, let's understand, he's talking to people who are religious, right? So you say like, oh, I maybe was a secular Jew 6 months ago or something. I didn't know these things. Okay, you're a secular Jew, you didn't know about these things. God bless you for listening now. But he's talking to religious people, obviously, and I would think knowledgeable people. But he continues, this is why? Why am I only writing to remind? Ki lo timtza barov dvarai. In most of what I write, you'll find dvarim shero b'nei adam yodim osam. Lo mistapim b'hem klal. Most of what I say are things that everybody agrees with it. Ella, shekafir rov pirsumam, according to how widely they're known, ukenegem mashimitam gluya lekol, and opposite, or in parallel to, in words with their truth is known to everyone. Kach ha'elam mehem matziv ma'od v'ashicha rabba. So too, the ha'elam is the lack of knowledge of them, is matziv ma'od is very found v'ashicha rabba, and the forgetfulness is much. So he says dvarim brurim here, that my point here is the way someone would write about a likud or something, that I'm just writing. There are good ideas out there that we all know mostly. I have a few chidushim, but most of this is known. And I'm just coming to remind everybody because there are things that we need to remind ourselves of. I said this is one of the biggest chidushim in the whole Sefer. In fact, it is, because it's hard to understand. Because there's so many chidushim in the Mesilas Yesharim. Every page is full of it. We've mentioned already, Rabbi Salanter said he couldn't write one page of Mesilas Yesharim. He could write Chuvas Noda B'Yehuda, but he couldn't write one page of Mesilas Yesharim. What does Rabbeinu mean that there aren't chidushim here? The idea that he's also mentioning ideas which are well known, Abbas Hashem, Yiras Hashem, etc. The ideas we'll talk about, being into Avodas Hashem, etc. For sure, but there are no chidushim. This is one of the hardest lines. In fact, there's a sefer which I won't mention right now. You'll see why. That's written on this, and my Rebbe Rav Lechter one time quoted it, and he said, "If this is the pshat, like X says, then I'm throwing out the Mesilas Yesharim." That's how much he didn't like that pshat. So I'm not going to say what that pshat was, but it's very difficult. And the truth is, friends, I don't have a good answer now, which is a bad way to start a shir, right? But in a certain way, it's good because it means I'm being honest with you. And hopefully, when I have what to say and to add, I will. And it's something to think about, right? What does he mean? Okay, so Sheila, maybe we'll find an answer as we learn. But that's what learning is all about, not just having answers. Especially a sefer like Mesilas Yesharim. Mesilas Yesharim is a sefer which puts us in a certain place. And what I do want to say is the idea that we have to see this last line. Kifi ro pirsumam, as much as the ideas are known, and as much as everybody thinks it's truth, like why is that? Think about it. It's such a so counterintuitive. As much as it's known and it's truthful, to that extent things are forgotten. So I'll tell you what the pshat in that is. And it makes total sense, and once I say, you'll see it. That when someone comes to you and says something that Yiddishkeit is all about the purple, okay, now he might be a nutcase, so you say, I'm not listening to him. But let's say, the Gadol Dor, Moshe LaHirsch, comes and says Yiddishkeit is all about purple. You say, this is a man who has a lot on his shoulders. He wouldn't just say a silly thing. There must be something there. He's saying some chiddush. It's obvious the chiddush is. But if someone gets up and says that Limud Torah is a chashuv a thing, yeah, I know that, of course. But here's the point. Once you know it on your conscious level so clearly, you often don't delve into it. And you don't really deal with the simple things. And we find a lot of things like fundamentals. Excuse the reference, but there was a certain basketball player who they used to call the fundamental. From what I remember, I think I missed him a little bit. I skipped over him. It was after my time, so to speak. But when I checked into a little bit, the idea was that he was so solid on the fundamentals. So solid. And that was what made him such a phenomenal player. No, but why isn't everybody solid on the fundamentals? Of course you have to be into the fundamentals. If you're learning, you have to read carefully, you have to cheshbon carefully, you have to think what you're saying. If you're davening, you have to focus, right? I have this wild chiddush. It's a good idea to turn off your phone before davening. Oh, that's radical. It's a good idea to leave your phone home before davening so you won't be distracted by it. A phone on airplane mode and on silent is different than a phone that's off. It's different than a phone that's at home. That's a fundamental thing. Davening is all about kavanah. Davening is all about talking to someone. How can you talk to someone? Your mind's all over the place. But when we hear these things, because we've heard them so many times, so they don't penetrate into us. And by the way, this is of course a very important thing in chinuch habanim. You have to, if you're like the expression I think is talking heads. So often parents become to their children talking heads because you're saying the same messages, which maybe they're hearing at school already, and you're just reinforcing them. So on the one hand, you have to reinforce what the child learns in school, but tavinu, understand that very often the way you reinforce what the child hears in school is by saying it in a different way, or waiting for a different hizdamnut, or maybe don't say it at the Shabbos table. Say it to your children as they're falling asleep. What a wonderful time to connect and share wonderful ideas. But I heard on a share that the Shabbos table it depends. If it's all mayhem's breaking loose in your house, or everybody's tired, or your wife or your husband aren't in a good mood, and now you're sharing ideas, it's not the time to share ideas. You have to think. So this is an incredible idea. In certain way, it's a little bit of a sad idea. It's a hard idea, but that very often the ideas that we know are dafka the ones that we don't go into. Right? I read about a certain Anam Gadol. He said about himself, what made him great? So all those ideas that everybody talks about doing, I did them. Like how do you know chazara? How do you make a good marriage? Think about your spouse and be nice to them. Well, that's radical. No, we need chidushim. We need wild ideas. So that's the idea that Rabbeinu is saying here, which is fascinating. The yesodistic of things. Again, the chidushim. There are many, many chidushim. But the fundamental ideas that he's going about are things that naturally, when something is fundamental, when something is well known, we don't go into it. And I think that's what Rabbeinu means. One last point, which I forgot to mention before, about the idea of how many chidushim there were. The Rabbi Yerucham said, the great mashgiach of the Mir in pre-war Poland, Mir Yeshiva, the Mir Mashgiach, Rabbi Yerucham Levavitz, Or Holam, Revolva calls him, light of the world. He said that all of the Ramchal's Kabbalah, he put into Mesilas Yesharim. That means all that's written in 7 volumes we have in other volumes. Ramchal was an amazing, amazing Kabbalist, which openly we don't see that. Many people have no asik at all, no yad, no touch with Kabbalah. Learn Mesilas Yesharim and dig into Mesilas Yesharim. But all that is somehow in this book. So it's Mali Chidushim. Okay, that's our question. But what we did learn is this amazing idea and therefore we have to always watch ourselves. When there are ideas which are obvious to us, make sure to go into them. Don't let the obviousness of the idea make that we are not attached to the idea. Realize that there's going to be a hurdle and a boundary. And when we say, oh yeah, I've heard that. I know that story. Why should I listen to the story again? Perfect example. Right? I don't want to listen to the story again. I heard that the rabbi said that story again. Doesn't he know the joke that you're not allowed to say? Doesn't he know that they said to a certain rav, how many times can you repeat a story? Oh, a story in your sermons? Once every 2 years. And a good joke. They have to wait 5 years. You have to wait 5 years. How about a Dvar Torah? You can say the same thing in the same drasha, right? So despite the cynical joke, it has to be a person hears a story. Let me hear it again. I'll hear another tom in it. I'm a different person now than I was when I originally heard the story. I'm a different person when I thought about the idea of Yerushalaim, when I thought about the idea of Talmud Torah K'nei Kulam, when I thought about the idea of Ahavas Yisrael. So as ourselves. It's in closing on this idea, it's ourselves as ourselves as students and ourselves as educators. As students, we have to make sure not to fall into this mistake that because an idea we're hearing from Sfarim, from a Rav, from a Rebbe, from a Rebbitzin, because we're used to the idea, don't turn off the second you hear it. And Adar would go into it, think about it openly. But as educators, and every parent is an educator, as educators, we have to realize that are we coming across to our kids in new ways that will be interesting to them, or are we just talking heads, saying the same ideas, which they're already tired of? Okay, let's continue. Al Kain, therefore, because of what we just said, Eina Toelis. Toelis is benefit. Hanilkat, which is gathered, Mizah Sefer Yotzei, Mina Kriya Bo Pamachas. You just read it one time, it's not going to have a big effect to you. Kikvar Efsher, it's Pashur Lo Yimtza Kar B'Sichlo, he won't find in his seichel, in his reasoning, Chidushim, Ach Kriyaso Shlo Hayabo Lefnei Kriyaso. Elamat. He'll find a few Chidushim, but if you're reading it for the Chidushim, close it now. Aval Toelis, the benefit is Yetzei Mina Chazor Alav Asmada, is by going over it and being masminid, hasmadim lashon tamid, by going over it all the time. Ki yiskru lo dvarim ha'ela, that will remind you, hanishkachim, hadvarim ha'ela shenishkachim, the other beteva, things that we naturally forget. V'yasim alibo, and he'll put onto himself chovato, his obligation. That word obligation will come up a lot in the first parak. His obligation, asher hu mitalem menu, the obligation towards the Avodas Hashem that he is mitalem, that he takes himself away from, that is hidden from him. So we have to take the Sefer seriously, and the way to take it seriously, Ramedo says, is by learning it many, many times and reviewing it and going over it. In fact, Rav Wolbe, the great Mashgiach, said, I believe I heard it from him, it's definitely written also, he learned it no less than 45 times. 4 or 5. That's tens of times he learned Mesilas Yesharim. Rav Kook, or Marna Raya, said that he had one in his pocket. I don't remember whether it was a full volume or a kits or something, that summary books, but he used to carry around. Rav Kook was a phenomenal Torah genius, but he carried around a small Mesilas Yesharim with himself. The girl used to chazer it all the time. So, and I emphasize this point, especially when you're listening, those who are just listening, maybe already reading inside. I hope everybody is reading inside. I hope everybody's gotten a sefer, etc. But especially if you're not learning it inside, and especially if you're just tuning in, that's fine. So maybe listen to the podcast again, listen to the video again, read the sefer again. Someone who can learn it once a month, once a year. Please don't end your Mesilas Yesharim experience together with my voice. Let the words of the Ramchal echo for you for your whole lives, and if you do that, I can guarantee your life will be changed.